Nothing happens if you tell the left no. No, we won't alter our way of doing business to suit your sensibilities. Buzz off! Nothing happens when you tell them that. Calling out their bluff is indeed useful. Meanwhile, we just learned that gay marriage isn't really a one-way street, and it can be reversed, and reversed should indeed be. In other news, misandry is starting to get really costly for the agents of misandry, and the hashtag MeToo agitators turned out to be exactly how we suspected they were. A bunch of misandric abusers projecting their own abusive tendencies on everyone else. These are our stories on the Good News video. Hello everyone and welcome to the third installment of the Good News video. It's been quite a good month so far with quite a lot of good news and also some predictions that we made here on the Freedom Alternative that have already materialized. It's almost as if agitation and propaganda, properly done, actually works or something. Now, of course, this doesn't mean we can open up the champagne, but it does mean that we're doing several things right. So, let's go through the news. First one comes from The Guardian. Gambling firms defy calls to stamp out sexist behavior at event. Very long article, so a few excerpts. Quote, gambling companies have defied calls to stamp out sexism at an industry conference with guests being entertained by pole dancers and a Playboy-themed show and hostesses claiming to have been harassed and propositioned. The ICE Totally Gaming conference held at London's Excel Centre drew a warning earlier this week after the UK gambling regulator. The Gambling Commission's chief executive, Sarah Harrison, threatened to boycott the event, at which she said women were expected to wear nothing more than swimsuits. Sounds like fun. Less than 24 hours later, the gaming software company Microgaming kicked off the conference with a Playboy-themed dance show celebrating the release of a gambling game based on the Glamour magazine. Another gambling company, Endorphina, hosted a popular stand in which pole dancers entertained the mostly male audience, some of whom filmed the show on their phones and had pictures taken with the women. The dancers, who wore high heels, fishnet stockings and lingerie, performed in front of a screen featuring words such as provocative and sensual. Sounds like a lot of fun. One woman at another stand, who said she had been hired as a hostess on a daily rate of £100, said, quote, somebody asked me yesterday how much I would charge, indicating that the request referred to sex. She said that the event was the closest thing to the President's Club dinner that she had worked at, a reference to the now defunct men-only event attended by politicians, businessmen and celebrities, at which hostesses were allegedly groped and propositioned. Asked what her job was at the gaming conference, she replied, just stand there. Two other women wearing thongs and body paint said that they had been provided by a hostess agency to work alongside 250 to 300 women from at least 6 agencies. They said they had experienced unwanted physical contact from men at the conference. There are guys who try and touch you when you're getting your picture taken with them, said one. You've just got to deal with it and say, get off me. A pair of hostesses handing out leaflets said the men working with them at the event treat us like princesses, but they added that women signed up to different agencies were expected to go to greater lengths. Some of the girls are in fetish gear with collars. Over the other side, it's more underwear and stuff, said one, adding that hostesses were paid anything between £8 and £15 an hour. Most of the people seated at the tables behind the exhibition stands were conference visitors met to discuss business and drum up trade, were men in suits. But the stands were mostly fronted by scantily clad hostesses in themed costumes, some of whom told The Guardian they had been hired for the day from professional model and hostess agencies. On Monday, Harrison warned that the Gambling Commission would boycott the ICE Totally Gaming conference if it did not stamp out sexism. She told companies attending the conference to be aware of the potential for a significant stain on the industry's reputation. This is an industry where we have a number of talented, powerful and successful women, Harrison said in a speech on the eve of the event. Yet from walking around the exhibition, you wouldn't know this. Instead, you saw men representing their companies wearing expensive tailored suits, whilst their female colleagues were expected to wear nothing more than swimsuits. I say bring this to an end now. And to go further, any future participation by the Gambling Commission in events like this will depend on there being change. The European Casino Association and the Clarion Gaming, which organizes the ICE conference, wrote an open letter to exhibitors earlier this week urging them to be aware of potential allegations of sexism in the spirit of the 21st century. Labour's deputy leader, Tom Watson, accused the gambling industry of being ignorant and called on bosses to show some moral leadership and stop the objectification of women. The gambling industry claims to be responsible, but this sexist and chauvinistic behavior has the evident approval of the men of the top, blah blah blah, wah, smjork, and the article goes on like that with more leftist whining. Now, good job by the ICE Totally Gaming organizers. This is exactly what needs to be done. Lefties come in and tell you to do something, you just tell them no. Politely ask them to go fuck themselves and carry on with your business as usual. Because nothing happens if you tell these loons no. Seriously, nothing happens. I mean, and all the whining by that lame, pathetic, useless cunt, the regulator, what's her name, Sarah Harrison, needs to also be ignored. In toto, as they say. Why? Because there's nothing she can do. She's there to regulate the gambling practices, the edge of the house and things like that, not the events themselves. Oh no, her useless agency will boycott the event. Well, good! How's that a bad thing? Who the hell needs more regulators anyway? Also, let's cut this pretense game, shall we? This whole business of, this is an industry where we have a number of powerful, talented, successful women, yet from walking around the exhibition you wouldn't know this. Let's cut that nonsense. This kind of pretense game needs to be called out for the absolute and utter lie that it is. Okay? Gambling is not something to which women are attracted to in reasonable numbers. And those that are attracted to this, well, could not care less about the models. In fact, many of them utterly do enjoy the masculine environment. But even if that hadn't been the case, even if they weren't, who cares? No, seriously, who cares? Quick, without using Google, can you name 5 successful women in gambling? I bet you can't, because there aren't 5 successful women in gambling whose success can be easily compared to the actually successful people who are all men. And this will never change, or at least not in the next 1,000 years or so. The thrills of risk have been and are and will continue to be overwhelmingly appealing to men. And not even all men, mind you. Most men cannot be successful in gambling either. But of those people who are attracted to this and will be successful in this kind of activity, the absolute majority of them will be men, by a very wide margin, 100 to 1 and likely even more than that, depending on the specifics of the game. And again, we're talking here about top-tier performers, not your average Joe or Jane who places a bet on a football match or horse race or whatever. Sure, that qualifies as gambling too, but not top-tier performance that goes to these kinds of conferences. And everyone knows this. And it is really refreshing to see the top players following reality rather than progressive leftist bullcrap and deciding to go ahead with what they know to be true and appreciated based on their decades of experience rather than the make-believe bullcrap coming out from the far left. Very good news. All right, Let's go further. Another piece of fantastic news from a cultural perspective anyway. Via The Guardian, Bermuda becomes the first jurisdiction in the world to repeal same-sex marriage. And it says, quote, Bermuda has become the first jurisdiction to legalize and then repeal same-sex marriage in what critics have called an unprecedented rollback of civil rights by the British territory. Bermuda's governor has signed into law a bill reversing the right of gay couples to marry despite a Supreme Court ruling last year authorizing same-sex marriage. Walton Brown, Bermuda's Minister of Home Affairs, said the legislation signed by Governor John Rankin would balance opposition to same-sex marriage on the socially conservative island while complying with European court rulings that ensure recognition and protection for same-sex couples in the territory. Bermuda's Senate and House of Assembly passed the legislation by wide margins in December, and the majority of voters opposed same-sex marriage in a referendum. The act is intended to strike a fair balance between two currently irreconcilable groups in Bermuda by restating that marriage must be between a male and a female, while at the same time recognizing and protecting the rights of same-sex couples, said Brown, whose ruling Progressive Labour Party proposed the repeal. LGBT civil rights groups said domestic partnerships amounted to a second-class status, and it was unprecedented for a jurisdiction to take away the legal right to marriage after it had been granted. Governor Rankin and the Bermuda Parliament have shamefully made Bermuda the first national territory in the world to repeal marriage equality, said Ty Cobb, director of Human Rights Campaign Global. I feel enormously disappointed, said Joe Gibbons, a 64-year-old married gay Bermudian. This is not equality. This is not our fight. Wah, wah, smirk. Okay, so this is obviously good news. Gay marriage is an abhorrent policy that will have to be rolled back one by one in every country that has committed the gigantic mistake of allowing it in the first place. But how significant this piece of news is? Well, that's harder to assess. And it is harder to assess because of the disproportionate reaction from the LGBT's lobby, who is obviously not accustomed to be politely told no. First of all, the population of Bermuda is, what, 70,000, 65,000 people? Something in that ballpark. So not a particularly big place population-wise. However, Bermuda is one of those countries that cannot be bullied into submission. Bermuda is one of the richest countries in the world, with average incomes higher than the United States, the United Kingdom, or really anyone in Europe or North America, with the possible exception of Luxembourg and Liechtenstein. And by the way, Liechtenstein doesn't recognize non-straight marriage either. It's almost as if only upper middle income places are so disordered. Very rich countries, middle income, and poor countries are remarkably sane on these issues. It's only those who aren't terribly rich but still in the first quarter who seem to be so keen in conducting such experiments and playing with the mental sanity of its normal majority. So, from the population size perspective, this move in Bermuda is irrelevant. However, from a cultural and especially legal perspective, it matters. From a cultural perspective, it's relevant because it can be used when a progressive speaks too much and just won't shut the hell up for a moment, that is to say, all the time. From a legal perspective, the example of Bermuda is a gold mine, because Bermuda is at the same time under the British common law and the European Union law and the European Court of Human Rights. That means their example is relevant all over the West and beyond when it comes to chit-chats between lobbyists, lawyers, and lawmakers. And that matters. Now, does this mean we'll soon see a wave of repealing of these anti-straight pieces of legislation? No, not really. It's going to take a longer time. But it does mean that it's no longer theoretically possible, but also very practically possible to roll back these kinds of legislation. And the smarter folks from the far left know this very well, and that's why they are terrified by it. And that's why they're so heavily against any sort of referenda, not just on this particular issue. Because when push comes to shove, in most places, most of the time, the majority of the populace will vote against the policies of the far left. And while the left spent millions of shekels to get Irish people from all over the world to win the Irish referendum, and spent millions more to create the illusion that most Americans support this degeneracy, when in fact they really don't, the left cannot afford to do this too often. Not to mention that one or two Supreme Court justices later, this whole thing can really change. And not just on gay marriage, abortion is also on the table. People don't realize just how pro-life the culture has gotten in the last decade alone. But more on that in another video. The point is that the Bermuda example is a milestone. Not a huge milestone, not a decisive milestone, but a milestone nonetheless, and the left knows it. Alright, let's move forward. Now let's talk about women's lies, otherwise known as false sexual assault allegations, and then we'll talk about Me Too as well. So, via the college fix, judge recommends university pay $850,000 to student it punished after exonerating him of rape claims. James Madison University learned an expensive lesson last week. Stop digging yourself further into the hole. A federal judge recommended the public university in Virginia pay a male student $849,231.25 in attorney's fees and litigation costs after the court determined a year ago that JMU ran a shoddy appeals process against John Doe when he initially prevailed in a sexual misconduct proceeding. The female student who accused Doe had appealed the finding in his favor using the mandatory double jeopardy provision in the Obama administration's 2011 Dear Colleague letter on Title IX. The appeal board then issued a new sanction against Doe, a lengthy suspension, without explaining why. Judge Elizabeth Dillon, who presided over the case, wrote then, quote, "The appeal board effectively reversed the decision of the hearing board without any explanation whatsoever and without ever expressing a finding that Doe was responsible for sexual misconduct. GMU's refusal to settle with Doe, who filed suit 3 years ago, proved costly." Joel Hope, the magistrate judge, knocked down the analysis by the university's outside attorney as largely unpersuasive and said he showed lack of familiarity with basic details. The judge took particular aim at the attorney's attempt to leave out Doe's secondary law firm, the Center for Individual Rights, almost entirely from the fee award. In the same vein, per the court's review of his annotations, the attorney concluded that roughly 97% of CIR's time was not compensable, mostly because he deemed it duplicative. He approved to write off as duplicative any task that appeared more than once in the billing records, including many entries for time spent revising and editing substantive briefs and motions. The university's basic argument that Doe didn't need two firms to handle his case is unpersuasive, Hope said, especially considering the complete success he achieved with both firms' representation. He belittled the university's logic, which implies that it is more reasonable to hire one large firm who staffs a case with multiple attorneys than to hire two solo practitioners. Much like the appeal board's refusal to explain why it issued a new punishment to Doe without finding him responsible, the university's outside attorney gave no explanation for his estimate of reasonable hours spent on the case by those lawyers, according to Hope, and it goes on with the court papers uploaded on the site, should you wish to consult it yourself. Anyway, very good stuff. And these are the cases that matter. It is these kinds of cases that are and will continue to demolish the misandric policies of various universities. Wait till Betsy DeVos, and by extension Donald Trump, finds out that the government needs to pay over $800K because of crappy feminist Obama policy. Progressives are correct to be worried because they know, just as we know, that once this thing becomes big enough, even most Democrats will be rushing to vote for the repealing of any such nonsense. And mind you, this is just the payment for the legal services. It's not the sum total of shekels that the university will pay. They also need to pay the victim here, the chap whose name and career trajectory has been destroyed by the university and the feminists who run it. and that one might be in the seven figures. Also, of course, everyone in the area should make sure to publicize the case in the area and help James Madison University have even fewer students next year. And the agitprop should go both ways, once with the classical line that this university is unsafe for men, and also with shaming against the men who do enroll anyway. Young men need to be compelled to look at the evidence and force-fed the red pill on these issues. Any man who voluntarily chooses to enroll at James Madison University is a complete and utter idiot, and needs to be known as such. Shaming works, people. Shaming changes behaviors. And as far as I'm concerned, the only acceptable result here is the abolition of all of these sexual assault policies in the university, combined with the firing of all the individuals associated with enforcing this brutal insanity. Anything less than that is unacceptable. No compromise, no prisoners. Yes, I am telling you to be an extremist, because there should be no compromise with feminists on anything at all for any reason. All right, let's go further into the I told you so territory. Via Fortune magazine, which is the place where all the top-tier virtue-signaling far leftists spew their garbage. Since #MeToo, the number of men who are uncomfortable mentoring women has tripled. I told you so. Now, seriously, do you remember a bit over a month ago when I told you this is going to happen, and that indeed it was already happening and the whole thing is gathering steam? Well, it took them a while to notice it. So let's read a bit from the article. Quote, "One of the unintended consequences of the Me Too movement seems to be the alienation of male mentors. A new set of findings from women's empowerment non-profit leanin.org and online survey platform SavvyMonkey reveal that since the media reports of sexual harassment first emerged last fall, male managers are 3 times as likely to say they are uncomfortable mentoring women and twice as uncomfortable working alone with a woman. The hesitation to meet with women outside of work is even more pronounced. Senior men were 3.5 times more likely to hesitate having a work dinner with a junior female colleague than a male one, and 5 times more likely to hesitate to travel for work with a junior woman." In a Facebook post Tuesday morning, Leanin.org founder Sheryl Sandberg explained that men's increasing unwillingness to mentor their female colleagues undoubtedly will decrease the opportunities women have at work. The Facebook COO pointed out that the last thing women need right now is even more isolation. Men vastly outnumber women as managers and senior leaders, so when they avoid, ice out, or exclude women, we pay the price. And how's that a bad thing? To encourage men to mentor their female colleagues, Leanin.org Tuesday launched a campaign called #MentorHer. Already, a number of high-profile male business leaders have made the commitment to mentor women, including Oath CEO Tim Armstrong, LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, and CEO Jeff Weiner, Unilever CEO Paul Bowman, and Facebook CEO Zuckerberg. Disney CEO Bob Iger gave a Twitter shout-out to ABC President Channing Dungey, saying he was proud of her and his other mentees. The New York Times, a former newspaper, investigation into allegations of sexual harassment and assault against media producer Harvey Weinstein inspired millions of women around the world to say "Me Too," that they too have experienced unwanted sexual advances or violence. A wave of accusations followed, knocking nearly 100 powerful men off their perches, including actors Kevin Spacey, tech investor Steve Jurvetson, music producer Russell Simmons, among others. The snowballing effects has led some men to express hesitation about being alone with women. In November, Fox News analyst Brit Hume tweeted Vice President Mike Pence's policy of avoiding being alone with women other than his wife, looking better every day. Far from being a solution, this attitude hurts women. Well, nobody cares. The Mentor Her campaign aims to educate about just why mentorship is so crucial to achieving gender parity in the workplace. Again, nobody needs or wants gender parity in the workplace. It's not a good thing, really. Among the powerful statistics the campaign site points out, people with mentors are more likely to get promoted. Women are 24% less likely than men to get advice from senior leaders. 62% of women of color say the lack of an influential mentor holds them back. Sandberg writes, if we're going to change the power imbalance that enables so much sexual harassment in the first place, we need to ensure women get more mentorship and sponsorship, not less. That's how we get the stretch assignments that lead to promotions. That's how we build the networks that put us on the path to exciting opportunities. That's how we get the respect and recognition that we deserve. Here's the thing. None of this matters. By the end of 2018, that number will triple once again. It's like Bitcoin. Well, back when Bitcoin was a thing, that is. It's just gonna go up and up for quite a long while. Because in business, unlike Hollywood, the opinion of some high-ranking CEOs simply doesn't matter. Besides, some of these cucks who tweeted in support of this nonsense aren't exactly relevant themselves anymore. Sure, they're rich, but not relevant. I mean, Reid Hoffman is the co-founder of LinkedIn, but he doesn't work there anymore. He's a partner in an investment fund. Quite a lucrative and cushy position, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to downplay the dude. What I am saying though is that he's out of touch and his opinion on this particular topic is largely irrelevant. He is no longer involved in the day-to-day management of any company. So it's easy for him to say, yeah, sure, I will hashtag mentor her, because he doesn't actually have to do it. Or he can just point anyone to his body of public work. He wrote several books about mentorship, individual guidance, startups, and other topics. So in a way, he already did mentor quite a lot of people already. These people are high profile, but they're not really that relevant as they think they are. Because when you get down to the brass tacks, it's the direct managers, in the case of big corporations, or the founder CEOs, in the case of small and medium enterprises, that need to make these decisions. And this latter category of people command roughly 90% of the economy in every single capitalist country. And it is this latter category that is getting increasingly wary of hiring women or meeting women alone or do any activity that exposes them to such liability. So Hoffman, or Zuckerberg for that matter, can speak fine and well from their billions in net worth, but those words fall on deaf ears for the vast majority of company managers who can't afford an entire army of lawyers. Also, please do take a look at Sheryl Sandberg's thread on Facebook. More than half of the comments are in full agreement with what I am saying and are telling Sandberg in a very polite and well-mannered way that she's delusional and that she can go fuck herself alongside with her ludicrous hashtag and her retarded ideology. Because virtue signaling has just gotten a bit too pricey for the vast majority of businessmen, and you cannot fight the cost-benefit analysis, my dear lefties. Whenever you fall on the wrong end of economics, sooner or later, economics wins. It's really that simple. So yeah, in mid-2017, only 5% of men in business were wary of women in the workplace. Now it's 16%. If we are to take Sheryl Sandberg's number at face value, though I suspect the number is larger than 16%, by mid-2019, it will at least double again. For sure. Because this cannot be stopped anymore. The precedent has been set, and unsetting it will take years. You wanted a change in mentality, my dear feminists? Well, you just got it. You wanted to change the way men think. That was all we need to change men. Well, congratulations. Now enjoy it. Because I sure will enjoy being part of the brutal backlash. And none of the whining will make any substantive difference, because when all is said and done, nobody cares. The vast majority of men will see the choice in front of them and will choose accordingly. And the choice is simple. Keep your career and status secure or risk everything just because equality. And the smarter feminists, like Sandberg, know full well, just like we know, that the choice is very simple, and 999 times out of 1,000 it will go the non-feminist way. Can that change again? Yes. When the vast majority of women will be vocal against the Me Too nonsense and become militant in abolishing all of the sexual harassment policies and the rest of the body of misandric law that crept into far too many places in the last decade, that's when it will change. Now, will that happen? Let's just say I'm not holding my breath on it. Welcome to the Mike Pence rules. Grab a chair, because this is going to be a very fine spectacle. Winning! Alright, staying in the Me Too territory, by far the juiciest piece of news I think this entire month, coming via Politico, Me Too movement lawmaker investigated for sexual misconduct allegations. This is so good. I love this timeline too much. Now the article is very long, written in a scoop, investigative style. Politico used to do that quite a lot, not anymore lately. So there's no way I'm reading the whole thing on air, but here's a few excerpts. Quote, California Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia, whose high-profile advocacy of the Me Too movement earned her national media notice, is herself the subject of a state legislative investigation in the wake of a report that she sexually harassed and groped a former legislative staffer. In December, when Time magazine announced that Silence Breaker, who spoke out against sexual harassment, were its Persons of the Year, Garcia's face was prominently included in the art accompanying the cover story. But Daniel Fierro of Cerritos told Politico that in 2014, as a 25-year-old staffer to Assemblywoman Ian Calderon, he was groped by Garcia, a powerful Democratic lawmaker who chairs the Legislative Women's Caucus and the Natural Resources Committee. He said she cornered him alone after the annual Assembly softball game in Sacramento as he attempted to clean up the dugout. Fierro, who said Garcia appeared inebriated, said she began stroking his back, then squeezed his buttocks and attempted to touch his crotch before he extricated himself and quickly left. Fierro said he never reported the incident, which occurred years before the current Me Too movement and new whistleblower legislation to protect legislative staffers. But after he mentioned the issue last January to Calderon, his former boss, the matter was then referred to the Assembly Rules Committee, which launched an investigation. Fierro is not the only one claiming improper advances by Garcia. A prominent Sacramento lobbyist says she also accosted him in May 2017 when she cornered him, made a graphic sexual proposal and tried to grab his crotch at a political fundraiser. He spoke to Politico on the condition of anonymity out of fear of reprisals. The lobbyist, who represents a major industry association, said that Garcia appeared to have been drinking heavily at a fundraiser hosted by Governor Jerry Brown for State Senator Josh Newman at the De Veres bar in Sacramento. He said he was heading out the door in part to avoid the Assemblywoman, who had been increasingly flirtatious and had called him on a few occasions before for late-night drinks, which he repeatedly declined. She spotted him and said, "Where are you going?" the lobbyist said. She came back and was whispering real close, and I could smell the booze and see she was pretty far gone, he said. She looked at me for a second and said, "I've set a goal for myself to fuck you." At that point, Garcia stepped in front of me and reaches out and is grabbing for my crotch, he said. That was the line in the SAD, according to the lobbyist, and he stopped her. I was 4 inches from her, eyeball to eyeball, and I said, "That ain't gonna happen." The accusations against Garcia come out at the close of months of high-profile activism on the issue of sexual harassment by the Assemblywoman, who became one of Sacramento's leading voices on #MeToo issue. Garcia was one of the hundreds of Sacramento women who signed a letter with the hashtag #WeSaidEnough protesting harassment and told the New York Times, a former newspaper, that she had been the repeated victim of sexual harassment by men in the Capitol in the course of her legislative work. When Time magazine included her photo in its Persons of the Year issue, Garcia tweeted, "I didn't know I was part of the story," saying it was an awkwardly humbling experience. "I'm proud of this work and proud of the company I'm in." She added the hashtags #MeToo and #WeSaidEnough. Jessica Levinson, a professor of law and political ethics at Loyola Law School of Los Angeles and the current president of the Los Angeles Ethics Commission, said that if proven true, the accusations against Garcia threaten to seriously damage the nationwide movement that has been credited with bringing the issue of sexual harassment into the open, as if that's a bad thing. Hypocrisy knows no bounds and no partisanship. It crosses all party affiliations, she said. To the extent that these are substantiated claims, there's a picture of Cristina Garcia as a hypocrite in the dictionary. The stories underscore how sexual harassment is not okay, period, regardless of whether it's by a man or a woman. And frankly, this threatens to set the movement back, because when you have one of the faces of this movement facing these allegations, that's a real problem. People will say, well, everybody on both sides does bad things, but it goes to who can we really believe anymore, Levinson said, and then it goes on and on and on with many, many details and gossip and whatnot. Do read it in its entirety. It is quite a funny read, for sure. So, do I believe the accusers? No, not really. Are the allegations plausible? Yeah, of course they're plausible. Women sexually harass men all the time. It's just that men don't bother with it because men haven't been indoctrinated for decades with a sexist and fascist ideology that tells them they're victims all the time whenever someone just looks at them, or even when someone tells them they're desired sexually. This used to be the case with women as well, especially in Europe. Listen to how Brigitte Bardot or Catherine Deneuve speak about these things. Older women who were, and some of them still are, successful, look at hashtag MeToo with contempt. As they should, because the whole MeToo business is contemptible, to say the least. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what I think, or any of you watching this think. What should matter for us is the narrative. Yes, this is the part where I insist again on us using leftist tools against the left. Never let a crisis go to waste needs to become standard operating procedure on our side as well. So, for narrative purposes, we should henceforth refer to Cristina Garcia as sexual harasser Democrat Cristina Garcia. Listen and believe. It's the standard she personally advocated for, so it is very fair to hold her to that exact standard. No, not all people are equal, because equality is a lie. So of course we should treat Cristina Garcia differently because she herself promoted a different standard. And her standards needs to absolutely be weaponized against her and against all the other leftists mercilessly. At the moment of this recording, this Democrat sexual harasser issued a statement on Twitter, of course, because that's where politics are happening these days, saying that she takes unpaid leave while the investigation is pending. No, she needs to resign and disappear. Not for good, but for a few years. I mean, why not? Her fellow Democrat and really colleague in the loony bin, actress Amber Tamblyn, wrote in what Andrew Klavan aptly calls the Knucklehead Row, otherwise known as the New York Times opinion section, the following quote: "The punishment for harassment is you disappear. The punishment for coercion is you disappear." So clearly the standard established by the Democrats needs to first and foremost be applied to all the Democrats, and especially to the evil trash that is at the forefront of hashtag MeToo. And this is the narrative we need to promote. Call to her office, call to the DNC, and ask when is the resignation coming. You're all smart people, otherwise you wouldn't be following this channel, so be creative. When I made the video about the necessary and inevitable backlash against MeToo, several ladies asked how they can help. Well, here's your chance. Make the phone calls, send the letters, the physical letters that is, and not the online LARPing. In government, physical letters and faxes, and yes, they still do exist, and phone calls are taken seriously. Online whining? Not so much. So yeah, let's use this fantastic piece of news and the newly created crisis for some good old-fashioned political gain. Also, I hear there are still such things as Republicans in California. I sure do hope that California GOP already has a camera-ready candidate to run to take her seat. This needs to happen. We need to become cynical and unforgiving, especially on issues where there cannot be any compromise. And with Me Too, no compromise is acceptable. Every single Me Too supporter is an enemy of capital C civilization, an enemy of due process, and an enemy of the social fabric itself. So any opportunity that arises to bury one of these people should be used mercilessly and without scruples. The time of being nice with such contemptible cunts is long in the past. Just saying. Alright. Well, that's pretty much for this installment of the Good News video. I will now head towards taping a new episode of Periodic Insanity as well, and then continue the work on more practical politics courses. It will be a crowded month, as I promised, since I will need more leeway once the Albania and then the United States tour come about. Anyway, so with all of that being said, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your consistent and generous support. Please do consider throwing a shekel if you can afford it. Do subscribe to my social media, and I'll see you all soon on Freedom Alternative.